Namaste, everyone. I'm not going to talk about Zarathustra and Zoroastrianism any longer than I have to, only because A, I have a borderline obsessive interest in this topic and could go on for hours, hence it would take a long time, and because I prefer content that I can crank out and cover very quickly due to returns on my investments or lack thereof, and due to want of time. I have a plethora of commitments in the real world. I'm a busy guy, in case you don't know, and brevity is the soul of wit. And most of my super long clips usually bomb and don't perform well. That being said, as far as the teachings of Zarathustra, Hegel and Nietzsche knew nothing about the teachings of Zarathustra or the worldview of our forebears. Nietzsche wrote a book called Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Also sprach Zarathustra in German, Cheningoft Zarathustra in Persian. I've read it both in English and in the original German. Ja klar, ich verstehe Deutsch. Iranian or Persian nationalists are absolutely clueless and oblivious if they actually bring him and his book up in any discussion about Asha, because his Zarathustra is not our Zarathustra. It's completely unrelated and irrelevant to Zoroastrian philosophy. This book is Nietzsche's philosophy, appropriating, horribly I might add, Zarathustra as his mouthpiece. It's about a fictional character named Zarathustra who is speaking on behalf of the warped author. This is Nietzsche's philosophy that he put into the mouth of a fictional character called Zarathustra. Those weren't the actual teachings of the historical Zarathustra, and as far as his actual teachings, they actually knew very little about them. Lots of quack authors attempting to make a name for themselves have written books pretending to know something about his actual teachings, but they don't. The reason these guys know absolutely almost nothing about Zarathustra is because we do not know much at all about Zarathustra to start with. And this is not something unique to him or his faith. Do you really think that Christians actually know the true and original and pure teachings of Jesus and of the original apostles and of the first church established in Palestine? The New Testament, including the four Gospels, were written down after Christ was long gone, and we know that Paul's road to Damascus conversion never happened, and that he was a liar. So yeah, we actually know very little about Zarathustra's teachings, other than what has been retained in the Avestan and Pahlavi literatures. Thank the Indians and the British for that. And if you're curious about any of that, Avesta.org is available to the public domain. Even with these corpuses, there still isn't a book that he wrote. There isn't a source illustrating the full scope and details of his teachings. We know very little about them. We know that they're dharmic in the sense that they believe in the concepts of Asha and natural law. However, he is someone who broke away from the Aryan community of his time to create his own concocted form of Vedic spirituality. We, Iranics, previous to Zarathustra, followed a purely Vedic form of spirituality, period. Zarathustra changed this. He reversed the Asuras and the Devas. He did many things that resulted in a watered down and concocted version of Sanatana Dharma to take shape. So, whenever you hear any Iranian nationalist talking about Zarathustra and his teachings, I don't mean to demean, but take their rhetoric with a grain of salt, because they're speculating at best and lying at worst, because very little information about them that's authentic is actually known, because it's not clear-cut. Neither Zarathustra nor the Magi left behind any books for us illustrating his opinions on this, his opinions on that. If you guys have ever heard of the Horamites, their movement, their cult, so to speak, represented a true and authentic form of Vedic spirituality, a true and authentically Vedic form of Zoroastrianism in comparison to the theology and practices of today's Parsis, because they bore the hallmarks of, for the lack of a better word, Hindus, that is to say, vegetarianism, belief in reincarnation, ahimsa, nonviolence in Sanskrit, and so on. We do not follow Zarathustra. We do not follow him. That's a wrong way of putting it. This is actually one of the biggest misconceptions of this faith. In addition to fire worship, this tradition predates him and his existence. The first so-called prophet of Zoroastrianism was actually King Yima, or so says the Vendadad. We do not follow Zarathustra. We respect and venerate him. We hold him as one of our gurus, but what we follow at the end of the day is the Aryan culture. For you can't follow someone's teachings if you don't even know what they were in any depth. But this doesn't even matter because the faith isn't based on the prophet. It's based on the worldview, which is distinctly a Dharmic one, and the Dharmic worldview is underpinned by the Vedic literature. So if you want to follow the path of Asha, you follow the Vedic way. And as far as Hegel and Nietzsche, they knew nothing about Zarathustra, so don't take a word that they said about Zarathustra or about our pre-Islamic forebears seriously, and moreover, I wouldn't take a word that Evola said about Zarathustra seriously. I wouldn't take a word that Guinon said about Zarathustra seriously. I wouldn't take a word that Giorgiani has said about Zarathustra seriously, especially not him. I wouldn't take a word that the Nazis, who were influenced by Nietzsche's book, said about Zarathustra seriously. I wouldn't take 95% or more of the authors who've written about him seriously whatsoever. As for the oft-repeated attempts to illustrate how the Abrahamic faiths knocked off Zoroastrianism, all of the sources that supposedly ascertain this are effectively either conjecture or forgeries, as they're from generations after the fact, specifically after Abrahamism had long been entrenched in Iran-Shah, ironically proving the opposite. Inspiring philosophy can enlighten you on how fraudulent and how posthumous the parallels are. Any source on Zoroastrian theology that's post-Islam in particular, disregard it entirely, and this is where I end my dissertation. Thank you for watching.